Hi, welcome to Arty Crafty Alchemy. Today I'm going to show you how to make your own pearl paints like the Finetec Coliro and the Kuretake for hand lettering and colouring and things like that, though I don't hand letter yet. I'm the Arty Crafty Alchemist. Let's create some magic. So firstly, I've created some ahead of time and I've also sprayed them with about 4 sprays of water from my Distress Mister just to get them activated. But I also have some perfect pearls, perfect copper. I have my little container. Now I also have these big containers, but that really is only if you have a lot of pearl medium, any type of pearls, then you could use it. But I have these little jars, so I'm just going with a little tiny one. And we need some liquid gum arabic. I have the powder as well, but I don't really like the powder that much. I find it very hard to get it to mix into things and disperse well. I have a little spoon. I'm going to take a nice amount of this. Not a whole lot because, as I said, I am not a hand letterer, so I don't want a whole lot to start with until I know whether I'm going to use it or not. I have a stick. This is just a skewer that I've cut down, and I'm going to drop some drops of gum arabic. I'm going to drop about 5 drops in there to start. Oh, that was 6. Never mind. We've got 1 hanging off, so let's get rid of that one. And then I'm going to stir this up. You want to make sure it's stirred in very well so that there's no lumps. All the colour is mixed through nicely. I think I could have stopped at 5 drops quite happily, but that's alright. That was nice and easy. I've had some that have taken a bit more effort and a few more drops. It just depends on, firstly, how fine your pearl is, your mica powder, I should say. You can use any mica powder to do this. I have used several different things. So I left mine to dry for about a week before they were solid for these little ones. Well, it was probably only a couple of days, but after about 2 days I forgot to check them again. So I've used this Beauty Treats eyeshadow, something that you can pick up in a junk shop, cheap shop, dollar shop. I've used this Craftworks Gold, which I actually have to label this what it is. I've had it for a while. I don't even know if Craftworks still exists, to be honest, but I got this at a shop in Australia called Spotlight, which sells a lot of craft items and material. This one again is Perfect Pearls, the Forever Blue, and this one is the White Pearlex, which just seems to be drinking in the water every time I add it, so we'll see how we go. I'm going to just use this Plaid number 8 1-stroke Donna Downey brush to swatch them. I've just taken a piece of black cardstock. This is just an offcut of cardstock that I had. I have a bunch of these cut to this size that I can use, and I've taken my Express-It tape and I've taped it down so that we can see what our colour looks like on both the white and the black. So I've wet my brush. I just need to grab an extra piece of paper towel because I'm not quite that organised. I'm just going to pop this under my book so I can wipe off. Okay, so I'm going to start with the sea green, and I may have added too much water, but we'll see. So I'm only going to go about halfway, just because if I do make more of these, I can swipe the other way as well. Now, this is just a very cheap Kmart Australia water pad. It's 24 sheets of 180 GSM and it's A4. It kind of looks like recycled paper to me. And it's 180 GSM, but it's still pretty flimsy, and $3. I can tell it's not going to be the greatest quality, but I thought I'd try it. So that's the sea green eyeshadow. Whoops. This is the gold Craftworks. Wow. That's really pretty. Very metallic. I'm not sure what else has been added to the eyeshadow one. So I think it has a bit of fine glitter in it as well, so it's not as pigmented as a normal mica powder would be. But the gold is beautiful. We'll try the Perfect Pearls Forever Blue. I'm just giving it a mix around. Need a little bit more. Oh, That was too much more. I didn't swipe any off that time. Can't get over how pretty that gold is. Okay, so now I'm going to do the Perfect Pearls, the Pearl X White, and I think I need a little bit more water on my brush because it's reactivated a lot and made it quite thick, very pasty. It will go, of course you can't see it very much on the white, although because it is so white on such a not quite white background, it's very greyish. That's why I think it might be recycled paper. Obviously it's all cellulose, no cotton in this paper. For $3 I wouldn't expect there to be. I just bought it to see what it was like. Sea green is drying quite nicely. It has a nice shimmer to it. The gold is absolutely stunning. Pearl X is quite pretty. We've got to wait and see how Forever Blue goes, as it's not quite dried enough yet. So I'm just going to pick up a little bit of this copper just because it's not dried out yet. As you can see, that's quite nice too. So I think one of the secrets to getting a really nice colour with these is to make sure that your mix is still quite thick, that you don't use too much water in them. I think I added too much water to the sea green. I might actually pull another sheet out of here, and I've dried off my brush a lot this time, so I'm swirling around in the sea green again. And I'm just going to give it another go without too much water added to the brush. There we go, that's better. I'd added a little bit too much water. Quite shimmery, quite nice on the black. They give you a beautiful colour, and you can use supplies you may have on hand. I got my gum arabic from a local art supply shop. I've had the Pearl X for years. I've had Perfect Pearls for quite a while. I do use them in my art and craft in various ways, especially when I'm colouring flowers. Sometimes I like a little bit of shimmer added to my flowers. So I think I'll stamp a flower and I'll come back and we'll see what we can do. So as you can see here, I actually have coloured one already. My camera battery went flat, so I had to charge it up because I couldn't find the other one at the time. So I thought I'd have a little play, and you can see I've only used the 5 colours that I've made so far to make this leaf, and it's very, very shimmery. I only stamped it like this, so this time I'm actually going to try with Versamark and some embossing powder. So I'm using my Tim Holtz stamp tool. I'm using a CD stamp, and I'm sorry I can't tell you where this stamp is from, what set it's from, because I actually bought it as a bunch of stamps. None of them were in their packets, they were all separate, so it was just a random bunch of stamps. I'm going to do this a couple of times because this is watercolour paper and I want to make sure to get a good impression, and I can see in the middle that I haven't actually had a decent impression at all, so the embossing powder won't stick to that. One thing I did forget to tell you is that when you make your paint and you want it to dry out, leave it in a safe place. I have a bookshelf with containers that I actually have a small gap about that big, and I put them on one of my container lids and I slid them on top of the containers so that they would dry out. So I'm just giving this really good pressure because, as I said, this is watercolour paper, and you can see I still had some black on there that I didn't clean off. I was lazy, I didn't get my stamp chamois out, so it's transferring, but that doesn't matter because this is just an experiment and I was tempted to do it in black anyway, so. But the white embossing powder was the one that I had near me, and I didn't want to go and pull out all my embossing powders to find a black one. I don't actually have a lot of white left, so I'm really hoping that when my Hedgehog Hollow box eventually gets here, that it has white in it instead of the clear. So I've already got a piece of paper. I have this Hampton Arts white embossing powder. Again, didn't use my stamp buddy. A big mistake on the watercolour paper, but we'll see how it goes. Well, it seems like we've got a fairly decent impression. I'm using a Print Blocks heat tool, really old, and it doesn't actually shoot in the way you'd expect it to, but I'm heating it up a lot beforehand because it's much like the Tim Holtz one, and it isn't actually for embossing. It's just one that blows heat out to dry things without moving stuff too much. So you can see that it's changed colour now and we are all heated up. One other thing I'm going to do is take my Fiskars paper trimmer and I'm just going to trim this because it will make it much easier to colour if it's trimmed down a bit. That way I'll be able to turn my paper whichever way I like. I've still left it on a fairly big piece of paper if I want to die cut it or trim it down anymore. Just remove the lids from all my colours. They probably need a little bit of a spritz because it's been a couple of hours since I did this. So I've got my Plaid number 8 one-stroke brush that I'm using, which doesn't actually get to a very fine point, but I just wanted something to practice with really. And I also have a Princeton 2/0. Is that 2 zeros? I'm not sure what that is. It's a very fine point one because when I did this, I was using the Princeton brush, and I'll see if we can get it to see the lines. These lines, some of them are quite thick because I was using this brush and it does not give a super fine point anymore. Not actually meant for watercolory things, but I didn't want to use any of my super good brushes because I want them to paint with. So I wasn't sure how these would go on the brushes. How I did the flowers was I took my Forever Blue and I just had it into a nice paste. And you can see here what I mean by it's not getting into a great point. I would take the blue and drop a lot in right at the start and pull it up. And while that was still wet, I would clean my brush off and then go into my white and grab a good amount of the white, not too watered down. Drop that in. Let them mix a little. That was probably a little too much white. Now I've gone out of the edges a little bit, but that doesn't matter. Then I just cool the blue paint up a little so that it mixes with the white. And I just play around with it till it looks nice. There we go. That'll dry out nicely. And we'll go around and we do it again. These are quite opaque unless you water them down a bit, so don't worry too much if you go into an area that you didn't really want that colour. Once it's dried and you go over it with the next colour, it dries quite opaque, so there should be no worries covering it up. And as I said, this hasn't got a very fine point, so it's not doing the greatest job, but for demonstration purposes it'll be alright for now. Again, we drop in puddles of white, pull it down into the blue a little, clean our brush, pull the blue up into the white. If we didn't leave enough blue down at the bottom, we can just drop a little bit more in, wipe it up. Now for the leaves, all I did was take seafoam green and have added a good amount of that colour in, doing it on the opposite side because that side's still wet. We don't want our colours to run together, and as you can see where I've embossed is actually resisting the colour. And then I just let that dry. For my centre, I added the copper. Get all those little areas in there that's in between all the embossing. So I'm just going to fill in the rest of the petals and I'll come back. I did them all the same way, and then when everything's dry, I'll come back and show you what to do next. Here we have our flower. Looks quite pretty. We could leave it like that and use it, or we can add some gold in. I'm just going to grab my fine tip brush and go and grab a little bit of gold. Love this gold. This is beautiful. Now, the reason I'm doing this is because I can't afford to buy the Coliro Finetec paints. One of the palettes I looked at in Australia was $60 for 6 paints, I think, which is just ridiculous. And when you look on Amazon and then they add the pose, ouch. So I'm just going to add a little bit to the leaves. You don't have to if you don't want to give them a little bit more interest. I did actually mean to drop some of this in while they were still wet, but I forgot. But you can do anything you want with them. Also, I just wanted to show you that all of the colours would work. Pulling a little bit of the colour up. Added a little bit too much. A little bit heavy-handed. Out of practice with my brushes. Been a while. I'm slacking on that front. So I'm just adding a few little lines in to give a little bit of extra colour, and I've added some drops into the middle to make that have a little bit more interest. And there we have our flower coloured with the paints I made. You can also obviously colour anything you like, butterflies, anything like that, and I just spilt water on my picture, so I'm just going to dab that up. Anywhere that you've got a colour paint that you don't like, just go over it again with the colour that's supposed to be there to hide that colour. I just wanted to show you a few other things. I got these off eBay. So if you can't afford the perfect pearls, in Australia they're not that cheap. $16 I think for 4 in a pack, maybe 20. 16 was a few years ago, so I'm not sure, they may have gone up. I got these little colours off eBay and I think they cost me $6 or $7. You just look up mica powder, and there was a fair few, I think I'm missing one, but there was a fair few in the thing. So I've got 22 colours. I could actually just take the gum arabic and add it straight to that. I also have, if you want a bigger area to work with, I have these little jars that I actually have embossing powders in. And these would make quite nice paint palettes, as they have a nice large surface close to the size of those palettes that I was talking about. Their pan sizes would probably be about that size. I'm not sure, maybe a little bit, they might be a little bit larger, but obviously probably not as deep as that. So they would also make great paint palettes. Any small containers that you have with lids would make great paint palettes. I painted on some super cheap paper today. I painted on this super cheap watercolour pad from Kmart. So it has buckled a little bit, but as this was just an experiment to see how they would go, I thought that would be fine. And as you can see, they swatched out nicely on here. We have some beautiful colours. I think I'll probably make some more of these in some different colours, just so I have a nice range to do things with. They've looked nice on the black and the white. I did use quite a thick, not too watered down version of the paints. If you want to use a more watered down version of the paint, that would also work. It would give you a thinner, more transparent layer of the paint. Much like in watercolour, the more water you add, the more translucent your paint becomes. So here you can see on this one, I've added the paint very sparingly and we can still see our lines underneath. Unlike with this one, and this one I only stamped, and I actually had to go around and add all the black lines back in again with a Sharpie, and even then I was having trouble getting some of the lines to work. And with this one, the white has actually resisted the paint, so it's pushed the paint off as we've coloured. So I hope you enjoyed my tutorial and decide to make your own paints. I think it works out a lot more economically in the long run than buying the paints here, especially in America. I think they can get them for something like $16 for a palette, which to then in Australia have to pay something like $60 is a bit ridiculous, but what can you do? It's where we live. To store your paints, leave the lids off them to let them dry out again, and then just pop your lids off on them and they're ready to go next time, and you just spritz some water in them and they'll be ready to go again. So I hope you enjoyed this tutorial, and I hope you make some paints of your own. I'd love to see your work. Feel free to link it to me below and I will check it out. Have a great day. Bye.